Oftentimes when I check our news, I just always feel the same thing. Like, how did we get on this timeline? It just feels so South Parky. For example, Trump finally got his Nobel Peace Prize for real. There's the picture right there. You can see it. And basically, Machado goes to the White House and gives Trump her Peace Prize, I guess. This is from the White House. They say, President Donald J. Trump meets with Maria Corina Machado of Venezuela in the Oval Office, during which he presented the president with her Nobel Peace Prize in recognition and honor. What? And then that's your headline then today. Wall Street Journal, Trump accepts Machado's Nobel Peace Prize during the White House visit. Isn't this bizarre? I don't think I've ever heard of something like this, but I mean, this is, again, the South Park timeline that we're on. Okay, despite the symbolic gesture, Machado emerged with no public backing from Trump. And that's the key there. It shows you can't do business with this dude, right? You even like literally give him your prize and then he still won't support you. And I think she's trying to effectively, call for democratic elections, become president of Venezuela. She's the opposition leader. He instead doubled down on his willingness to deal with Venezuela's socialist regime rather than press for a democratic transition. And this is the quote from his social media. Quote, "It was my great honor to meet Maria Corina Machado of Venezuela today. She's a wonderful woman who has been through so much. Maria presented me with her Nobel Peace Prize for the work I have done. Such a wonderful gesture of mutual respect." Okay, so why aren't you supporting her? So they had lunch. It says Machado and Trump met privately over lunch, their first face-to-face encounter. Her allies hoped it would lead to a stronger connection and prompt Trump to engage the opposition in his administration's plans for Venezuela. And when you think about something like this, if they're going to take the meeting, you're going to have lunch, and you're going to come bring in the prize for the photo op, you would think maybe there was some sort of assurance from Trump's people to be like, okay, if you give him the prize, he's receptive to supporting you publicly or something like that. I mean, there must have been some sort of deal made. I don't think this would have been a surprise kind of thing. I mean, you know what I mean? Maybe it was a birthday type surprise for Trump, surprise, but it just seems like there should have been some sort of deal in place if you're going to do this publicly, give him the prize, and then he doesn't back you. It's strange.
Maria, did you offer to President Trump your Nobel Peace Prize?
I presented the President of the United States the medal of the Nobel Peace Prize, and
whole thing is strange. But again, we're in the South Park timeline. Then it says here, okay, her allies hope for, right, would lead to a stronger connection with Trump. It makes sense from her point of view, to engage opposition administrative plans for Venezuela. But the White House affirmed earlier Thursday he would continue to work with the country's acting president, Rodriguez, right? So he's going to work with the other person. Quote, this is from Karen Levitt. "The president likes what he's seeing, and we expect that cooperation to continue." Again, talking about Rodriguez. I guess he spoke on the phone to Rodriguez. He thinks he's a terrific person. I think they're getting along very well with Venezuela. Great. What a bizarre story, though. He gets the free prize that way. Then he's taking pictures with the Stanley Cup. So I guess if you want to argue that they're going to give him the Stanley Cup, this is a crazy world that we live in. That's the Florida Panthers, the hockey team. And they're also pushing for the bigger military budget, the $1.5 trillion. That's a 50% increase. And it says, war fighters, not Wall Street. Great. I just shake my head. It's like, how much more wackiness can you have? Well, one of the ICE people is leaving. This says the number 2 official. Her name is Madison Sheehan. And I wonder, and you can read this any number of ways, right? What someone says in public for this kind of stuff is different. What's going on in private or what's really going on. Is she running away from ICE and go do something else, right? Just get out while you can. Is she just that kind of person just wants to advance her political career, does whatever, right? Go in Ohio to do that. Or, what else could it possibly be? But they are leaving. And you can see right there, top ICE official steps down to run for Congress in Ohio. And it's interesting because this comes at a time when you guys know they just killed Renee Good, and actually they killed another person, which we'll talk about in a moment here. But, we're going to get a lot of reporting and news on this stuff as essentially what it is. Trump and his people seem to be giving a green light to escalate the violence. So, for example, it says here, rather than encourage agents to de-escalate combustible encounters, as agency guidelines emphasize, and this is from the New York Times. They have like the guidebooks, like you shouldn't automatically reach for your weapon and that kind of stuff. And that part's here, right? First step, arresting an occupant of a vehicle is to not reach in or grab him, right? So they basically just has all the guidelines of things you shouldn't do. But when you go what Trump and his people are up to, Trump and his lieutenants have provided tacit approval for more aggressive tactics, right? And then J.D. Vance will tweet out stuff like absolute immunity, these kind of things. And it's just, this is the mixed messages that ICE is getting. So theoretically, their training is, supposed to follow, try to de-escalate stuff. Don't say just grabbing the vehicle right away or reach for your weapon. The other thing it says here, it was reviewed by New York Times along with other training materials. ICE officials will thoroughly investigate any encounter, but, quote, deadly force is allowed when the agent believes their lives are in danger. So that's why they automatically jump into the ICE, no matter what they say. They always say, well, lives are in danger, therefore we have to shoot, right? And then the Trump people are like, wow, you have immunity. So, this sort of escalates the problem. And then you've got this. This just came out today. Medical examiner believes death of man in ICE custody was homicide, recording says. And I want to go through the details of this one. And you never know for sure with this stuff. I just want to make that clear when we go through what they're saying. Because this kind of situation where there's been deaths of detainees has happened more than once. I actually didn't realize it was this many because there's always, something to cover with ICE. And I mean, you can see right there, ICE detainee deaths by month. And it could be in a number of things, but just want to show you this. That's what it is. This particular one, though, as I said, they're talking about homicide and has to do with what the, I think it was the coroner told a family member. And I'll read a bit of it so you guys can understand the details of it. It says, when U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, so ICE, announced the January 3rd death of detainee Geraldo Luis Campos at the Texas detention camp, the agency said, quote, staff observed him in distress and it gave no cause of death. Okay, so died, but didn't necessarily say why. An employee of El Paso County's Office of the Medical Examiner told Campos' daughter that this week that subject to results of the toxicology report, the office is likely to classify the death as a homicide. Okay, so that's what they told the daughter, but wait till the final thing here. And it says in the recording which the daughter shared with Washington Post, so they heard this thing. It says the employee said a doctor there, quote, is listing the preliminary cause of death as asphyxia due to neck and chest compression, which means Luis Campos did not get enough oxygen because of the pressure on his neck and chest. Pending the results of the toxicology report, the staffer said on the recording, our doctors believing that we're going to be listing the manner of death as homicide. And that's sort of where, again, I showed you this, so that I guess these kind of things that happen more than once. It's I'll keep going over it. I'll just say that it's a complicated story because you're dealing with private prisons, which someone's profiting off this stuff, right? So are these type of people going to face any sort of accountability? They're probably going to make the case that this was, a bad person. And that's why I mentioned the where Trump and Vance will say, oh, all these people have immunity, et cetera. But this isn't necessarily federal staff. It's, I think it's a private prison thing because it says 55-year-old Cuban immigrant Luis Campos died following a struggle with the detention staff. That's what they say. That's how they phrase it. According to an eyewitness account and an internal ICE document reviewed by the Post. Okay. Let's see what else it says. This is an email then from Tricia McLaughlin. That's one of the Trump people's spokesperson. You'll see her all the time on Fox News because she's always saying the same stuff for this kind of thing. So it says, Tricia McLaughlin, Assistant Secretary of the Homeland Security, said that Luis Campos died after attempting to essentially delete himself, right? I guess that's how they're phrasing it. Campos violently resisted the security staff and continued to attempt to take his life, I guess. It's his own. I think that's what he's saying. During the ensuing struggle, Campos stopped breathing and lost consciousness. Medical staff was immediately called and responded. After repeated attempts to resuscitate him, EMTs declared him deceased on the scene. I don't know. It doesn't really make sense to me, but we'll hear a little more. McLaughlin declined to provide additional documentation, calling the matter an active investigation. Okay. Homicide ruling for the medical examiner would most certainly draw attention to the Camp East Montana, a colossal makeshift tent. Now it's a tent. Tent and camp on the Mexican border where migrants have been reported substandard conditions and physical abuse. ICE own inspectors have cited dozens of violations of federal detention standards. And then this is the stuff that they're going to focus on, right? And regardless of what they say of something like this, it doesn't necessarily mean you just can kill them in the detention center. Just to be clear on that, right? Court records show Lunas Campos was convicted of several crimes, included aggravated assault with a weapon. He has a sexual abuse, a thing involving a child. ICE arrested Lunas Campos in a planned enforcement operation, so that was back in July, so had been in detention for a while. And then it says he has a criminal record from 97 to 2015, so quite a long time. Then there was an eyewitness who saw it, and it just says, speaking in Spanish, that I guess he was saying, no puedo respira, so I can't breathe. Medical staff tried to resuscitate him for an hour, after which they took his body away. Quote, he said, I cannot breathe. After that, we don't hear his voice anymore, and that's it. And that's from a witness, Flores. It's hard to say with this stuff. I know it's a homicide, Lopez says. The people that physically harmed him should be held accountable. And then this is how you would talk about that. A medical examiner's finding of homicide means that someone's death was caused at least in part by the actions of another person and does not necessarily imply any intention to kill. Okay, so that's sort of how you would define that. But as I mentioned from the beginning, though, is how are we going to, investigate this stuff? How are we going to enforcing these kind of things or know what's happening? Because this is at a private detention center, right? The death raises new questions about ICE's reliance on private detention centers, right? Which the government entrusts to manage security, food, and transportation and medical care. So all that stuff involves money. So, for example, the government, has a contract with whatever detention center, and say half the money goes for food, for example, then half the money disappears. Just for example, like these kind of situations, or the campaign donor is then awarded various contracts in relation to security, food, transportation, medical care, all these kind of things. But this is the administration that Trump's run. So, nothing necessarily surprises me other than, for me, any one of these things would be a massive scandal. And I always say the same thing, like any normal functioning, country, people would be like, oh my God, this guy's awful. I think the majority of Americans do feel that way. Every time I check the polls, it's anywhere from 60 to 7%, don't like the dude, and you're still stuck with however you want to rate it. Maybe it's 30% some days, maybe it's 35% other days, right? That still like the guy, but there's just, I don't think this can last much longer. And that's why I said it, when you look at the, say, number 2 person of ICE leaving, you can read that any number of ways. But he did get his Nobel Peace Prize, although I guess Machado didn't get much benefit other than a picture. If that's a benefit, maybe that's like opposite of a benefit. It's like a stain that you have to live with. Oh God, I have this picture with Trump, and everyone saw it. God, crap. So that's what's going on. Please stay safe out there, everyone. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, and I'll catch you all in the next video.